6:30.
Oh, I could, if somebody
was-
live streams it, I could. I'll just follow it. I'll follow the game.
Is that, so what if he's not here?
Who?
What if we're both?
I got it. Aaron.
Because we got public comment, and then the other presentation, you want to figure between those two, basic 30.
You're good, okay.
We'll do it at a later.
I'll have it on my phone. It'll look at me. But I am.
We'll see how.
Okay, it is 6 o'clock, so I would like to call this meeting to order. Alicia, could you please do roll call?
Yep. Lori Belargin.
Here.
Ian McDonald.
Here.
Matt Kukalt.
Here.
Lacey Oster.
Here.
Bruce Belargin. Cherie Link. Marge Bull.
Okay. Our district mission, together we engage, educate, and empower all learners, bridging their passions to pathways to create successful futures and positively contribute to our local and global communities. Is there a motion to approve our agenda this evening?
I'll make a motion to approve it with the amendment of the removal of adjourning into closed session. Move this to a time when everyone is here.
Is there a second?
Second that, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll start out then going to our public comment. Danielle, would you like to start us out? Sure. So you're right on top.
Danielle Erickson, 62nd Street, Somerset, Wisconsin, Moms for Liberty, St. Clair County, chapter chair, also a parent. We understand this book challenge process has been intense and time-consuming for all parties involved. In the spirit of partnership, we wanted to reach out and offer our ideas regarding potential policy changes that could build more options and informed decisions for parents as it relates to literature their student is exposed to from the school library and curriculum. Our hope would be to minimize the number of book challenges going forward by implementing a transparent and effective flagging system and database for parents to utilize to have a voice in what their students are reading in the school library and in the classroom. This would look like developing a simple and straightforward literature evaluation protocol for all existing books in the district library and in classrooms. That includes choice books and curriculum. This evaluation would visually and digitally flag sensitive material books to include titles that depict activities that are sexual, illegal, inappropriate, as well as books showcasing controversial topics that families have varying beliefs or ideologies, such as the books now in the elementary school, and those were sent earlier to you this evening. We believe that our proposed policy change ideas and sensitive material flagging system outlined and sent earlier will support the goals of the community pillar and allow for a true ongoing collaboration to develop regarding this very complex issue while also building mutual trust for all parties. Further, we feel getting parents involved earlier in this process in a more proactive way will help empower and engage them while hopefully reduce any residual book challenges. We truly do want to partner with the school on this matter while remaining committed to keeping our students aligned with their personal family value systems and allow parents to decide what content is psychologically safe or appropriate for their child. Thank you.
Ruth?
Hi, everybody. Ruth Harleen, 1955 County Road C in Somerset. First of all, I'm talking about books again. I know that's surprising. First of all, I want to give thanks to all of the board members, to Dr. Donnelly, and all of the members of the community who continue to show up here for these meetings and grapple with the right thing to do when the two sides are so very far apart. I appreciate Lacey's admission that she's lost sleep over this. I too have spent many hours analyzing just why the hell I feel so challenged by all of these issues that we're discussing. After the last meeting, I was searching for a way of how to distill it all, and I think I found the heart of the issue here. Let's make it simple. The group of individuals who are pushing for changes to the library, outside of what Danny said tonight, and I appreciate what you said, Danny, I really do. But people who have been pushing for changes are basically have one goal in mind, and that's to remove books from the shelves in the library. Not just for their children, but for all of the children in the community. Obviously, those of us who stand in opposition find value in the books in question. So if the board is to follow its own protocol, which is to make decisions that are in the best interest of all the students, removing books that many parents want their children to have access to completely disregards a portion of the community with no alternatives available. Let's put some time and resources into a process for parents of 9th and 10th graders who wish to restrict access to materials they find objectionable. It's only applicable to the kids who are younger than 16, and we should be able to come up with a process that is bulletproof in that regard. I trust that we have the right professionals in the high school to do this. That's it in a nutshell. If you remove books from the shelves, you are taking away all options for those of us who want them to remain. That would be an extreme decision that ignores a sizable part of the community that you represent. Thank you very much.
Travis?
Travis Schochner. I live on 2116 54th Street. I am here to thank the members of this board for their open and honest discussion of the application of the book policy during the last meeting. Although some of the debate seemed to stray away from the discussion about the process overall and more about the book at hand, that is to be expected. I do find it frustrating that we as a community are literally asking this board to follow its own policy and legal obligations, but that is the world that we find ourselves currently in. With that said, I saw that the book policy itself was up for discussion tonight. I think an acceptable compromise would be to formalize the current opt-out practice into policy. By doing this, we as a community are asking that parents be informed and engaged with their children's educational exposure. However, anything else, including things like an opt-in policy, are unacceptable. This is because it puts the desire to inflict ignorance on the future of our community ahead of the knowledge, experience of the vetted experts that we trust and pay for. That word, experts. Ignorant people have repeatedly asked if they're not experts because they are parents. No, they are not. At best, they may be experts in the needs of their children, but they are not experts in the field of education. And that is what this discussion is about. Publicly asking this asinine question is the equivalent of asking, since I own a toothbrush, am I not a dentist? Or stating that I must be a chemist because someone else uses hair coloring on my hair, and that makes me an expert in the field of chemistry. The difference between experts and the ignorant is that experts are willing to accept challenges and seek out different information. This allows them to develop a deeper understanding of their specialty. The ignorant do none of these things, but instead only to seek out reinforcement of their opinions and suppression of any facts that would challenge these opinions. The ignorant seek to do this and not look up and expand their views on the world around them, but look down and plant more seeds in the fields of ignorance. The irony is that predators lie in wait in those fields of ignorance. Predators that constantly undermine, confuse, obfuscate reality and truth. Predators that ask questions but never answer, and when presented with the truth, they just deny it. Predators, such as bigots, grifters, groomers, and the abusers,
20 seconds.
can continue to have their prey, the willfully ignorant, the fearful, and yes, the innocent, unknowingly tend the fields that they take advantage of. This is a natural law. Just like survival of the fittest, predators prey on ignorance.
Erica?
Hello. It's all us repeat offenders up here. So, Erica Johnson, 1999, County Road C in Somerset. I'm talking about, of course, the books. And one of the past sessions, somebody stated and raised that parents and community members should be part of the selection process and the review process. But there's already parents and community members as part of this selection process. So why would we need extra people? What would that process look like for us? Would there be another election? Would it be authoritarian and directed by the school board? Would you pick somebody on each side, which would make no difference because they would cancel each other out, right? I mean, what would that do? It would increase the costs because we would have more people looking at the books. We'd have more people saying it would muddy the waters, right? It wouldn't buy us anything to have parents and community members looking at it. Also, what's the criteria for that? Would parents have to have members in the high school or kids in the high school to review the high school books? Because somebody that has like a 7-year-old would look at high school books and go, they're not age appropriate. You're right, they're not age appropriate for a 7-year-old. Just like if you gave a high schooler a 7-year-old age appropriate book, they might be a little bored with that content. I'm just saying. There's a lot of things and factors that you would have to think about if you included community members and parents. Also, being a parent doesn't make you an expert. There is no expert of I'm not gonna, because I have a sink, I'm not a plumber. I mean, just like Travis said, there's no experts there. I want somebody who has expertise. I don't want the guy that built the Titan submarine to be my expert because he built it out of the wrong material and it wasn't peer reviewed and he didn't have scientists doing that. Guess what happened? You had blendered billionaires. So let's not do that. That's what non-experts get you. They think they're doing the right thing and they're not because they're only focused on what they want and they have myopic thinking. So that's all my thing is, opening up this can of worms and having community members and parents, which already exist on that current panel, because we have experts that have kids in the school system and that they are community members that live here. So it would be redundant for us to ask for any more. And that's it. Thanks.
Kate?
First of all, this is the first time I got to hear Danny talk about trying to come together and make it right for both of us. So I'm hoping that we can do that because I think all of us here want to get back to what's going on. But I'm going to just say a few of the things I thought from the last couple times. I watched the last one and I had some thoughts. So I had friends growing up that weren't allowed to watch cartoons. The parents thought they were too violent. That family never told us that we couldn't watch cartoons, but whenever we watched them when we were without those kids. We never tried to cross that line. When I had kids of my own, I didn't let them play certain video games. I never called the parents that allowed their kids to play those same games. I just made sure my kids knew how I felt and they obeyed my rules. There are always going to be families that are stricter in the things they give their children access to. But Somerset needs to draw the line between parental overreach and let the professionals do their jobs. Parents can and should continue to do what's right for their own families, like generations of parents have done before them. Many of the people trying to remove books from their library have stood up here talking about traditional family values. I consider myself to have traditional family values. My family values may not align with your views, but we don't have to agree. We just need to come to an agreement on how to deal with this right here. Parents, talk to your kids. Tell them about the books that are unacceptable to you and explain to them why. Stand up and be proud of those values then. Although we may not agree on what crosses the line of what we want our kids to read, we should agree that parents get to make that choice. In fact, you probably know what's best for your kids. You know that they're not ready for these books. You certainly know your kids better than I do. I, however, know my kids, and I feel strongly that they are ready to learn about the difficult topics of violence, sexuality, etc. The people here who want our kids to read these books aren't bad people. We just find value in learning things that challenge us. The thought-provoking subjects that made this question the world we live in have helped us see the world in a way that we have never experienced before, and we want that for our kids. We think that letting our children learn difficult lessons from the hardships the characters face will give them the insight that will positively affect the choices that they make in their own lives. I trust that the knowledge they gain by reading is greater than any harm you think we're exposing to them. That being said, we don't want to change your mind about whether your kids read these books. We just want you to change your mind about making that decision for us.
Okay, moving on with our agenda, we are up for Gateway Homes and High Point Homes presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Henry Hansen. I'm a consultant with Citywide Development, and I'm I was chosen to represent kind of this easement that was proposed and talked through and part of a preliminary and final plat for the Winesap Prairie subdivision. And kind of brought two different slides today, kind of go through and explain to you what it is, and that's maybe a little back history. When we went through the process of getting the plat, a preliminary plat and the final plat for the subdivision, and going through with the engineering, city engineer, city attorney, developers agreement, and all that stuff for each phase, this was discussed. It was discussed only with the previous superintendent. So going back and kind of recapping some of the things that were discussed with him, I'm not sure he brought it to the board or even discussed it with the board. It was just verbally was agreed to that, yeah, this looks good, this is great. You know, he was at a couple city council meetings and when we were getting our approval, and now coming to that we have to get this done and we have to get an easement in place. Shannon had asked me to come and kind of just give you guys a little bit of a education on what it is and what it entails. So with the subdivision that's kind of wrapping around the school, there is going to be on this side where you have the street coming in off of the Meadows project to the, what is it, north. Off of this holding pond, there'll be a connecting pipe that comes through on the north side of the street, comes along the tree line, and it comes along the side of the holding pond to the east. And then obviously hooks up right next to the street. So what we're here to kind of discuss or maybe give an education on is that pipe, that drainage pipe requires easement. We kind of thought the easement came with the final plat and the development, the state and county approval, but it got skipped somehow, some way. So we're here to educate, get everybody, you know, hopefully get everybody on board and just kind of give you an idea of what it would entail. So the pros of it is, you know, the developer is taking on the cost of putting it in. It's very, very expensive, and it's for any development on this side of Somerset that's in the city limits. Somerset is a progressive storm sewer system city. So it runs into, you know, several different ponds, sediment ponds, holding ponds, and then continued traverses all the way down, and then has these certain requirements that are all engineered before it goes into the river. So this fits the profile. It was approved by the city engineer, and the state for this concept that is drawn out now. So that being said, the process is it would require excavation coming out of this new storm pond that's being built now. It would come across just roughly by the curve on the, what is that, northwest side of the property. It'll continue in your, I don't think is that mowed or anything over in that area, or is that still field, or looks to me like it's mostly field.
Can you kind of orient us to what we're looking at here? Where does the school sit?
So the school sits down in here. This street is, I can't remember the name of this street, but this is a street that heads kind of northwest over into Meadows, comes up into the Meadows subdivision.
That's the current road that comes from the Meadows onto the school property?
Correct. This is all school property here. This is where the subdivision is over this way.
So that,
I guess I should have brought up.
Is the other one better maybe? Is this
No,
one
it's-
better?
Yes.
Is this one better? Okay.
Yeah.
okay.
So you can see this is on
Oh,
And
like
can you
a
just,
Google overlay.
can you just point out where the school property line is real quick?
This is all school property, all through here.
All the way to the top of that map?
So
Yeah.
it's on
Yep,
both
this is
sides.
your undeveloped portion of the school
Yep.
property. And then this is, you know, basically all the actively used area. So we would come across, we would not disturb the street area here. we would bore this section of pipe in and then start at our first manhole, and then we'd open cut this pipe in all the way to here. And then restore everything, put it back, make sure that it looked just like it was or better than what it was as it is now.
So that's gonna feed into the holding pond down by the roundabout right now?
It doesn't actually go into this holding pond, it actually comes down and it goes into the structure where the outlet is for this holding pond. And so what it does for the future of the school is it's sized appropriately to handle any future growth the school might have for their storm sewer needs. So it would eliminate, you know, pipe being done. If you were to come up into this area or develop anything in this area here, you have a readily, you know, a pipe sitting there ready to handle any storm sewer. So it was sized with that in mind.
Because that holding pond right now is already overwhelmed.
Yeah, we don't dump into this one. We go past it, and where your outlet is, that goes to the rest of the city, we go into another manhole or structure, just down from that.
There's no
that
way
goes
you
into
could
the
backfeed during a heavy rainfall into that?
Nope, it's not, it's designed not to do that. So I guess our request or our thing that we need to do is procure the easement for the pipe to go in from the school. And it was not discussed prior when we got the, you know, approval from the county and the state and the village. And it just kind of came up. And so now with you know, meeting with Shannon and kind of giving the board kind of an idea of what we're looking for, hopefully we can have some further discussion and kind of get it resolved. I'm here representing the developer, so whatever questions you might have, I can bring back to him and or answer. If it's something that's technically related or engineering related, I may be able to answer those questions.
I have a few questions.
I do too.
Okay.
I don't know when the right time, this is probably a conversation with you. This is kind of.
Well, I think while he's here, anything that would be helpful for him, for sure. You know, as Henry said, I didn't know anything about this until they had contacted me to sit down and have some discussion. So we've had 2 meetings now, so I could kind of learn kind of how we got here. Tonight's intent was really just to kind of bring some awareness to you as a board that these conversations are happening. No action or anything like that is being asked tonight because we have some additional conversations that we need to continue to have regarding just kind of the further benefit to the school district. I know he mentioned future development, which is something we certainly talked about. We may never develop on that property, who knows, right? But so we have a little bit more that I want to talk about with the company and the developer of how we ensure that this is mutually beneficial to the district as well as to the developer. So.
Well, I do remember Mark talking about this and saying that it was mutually beneficial because of being able to tie in any future building. So you said something about it being progressive? I don't remember.
Oh, it's just the way that certain
retaining
villages and certain cities have, there's several different ways to do your stormwater treatment and flowing. And so this particular, the village here particularly has what they call a progressive storm sewer, you know, plan. So it runs in unison with everything else. So they have these 100-year flood requirements that they have to meet, and for heavy rains, and they have to have sediment and, you know, clean water, and certain runoff rules. So this just fits their progressive, so it goes down through the city and hits different, you know, areas and dumps into different catch basins through the city prior to it. So it's managed prior to it going into the river, so there's no contamination going into the river.
So going through these different stages is acting as a filter so the water going
Correct.
into the river is clean.
Correct, and then it's also helping with any flooding issues down the road. So that's why I referred to the 100-year flooding, you know, plan. So you have to, you know, figure out how many gallons of water in a storm event, you know, of a certain size, and then how that's handled throughout the subdivision and the city, obviously. But in our case, we had to prove up what we had for impervious surface. That's a number that's calculated by the engineers and confirmed by the city engineers, you know, to get your plat. And so this was the option that both the city, the county, and the state would preferred. There was another option of coming in and tying into a catch basin that's down in here somewhere, and then kind of tearing up a lot of the school area, but we couldn't get it. The downside to that was we couldn't get the right size pipe for any future, addition to that line, so you wouldn't have, there was not a lot of benefit to having the line in for any future storm sewer being, conveyed through that line since we're putting it in. So that was kind of mixed, and there was another one further to the north, but that created its own problems, and it kind of did a kitty corner thing along the, the school property, and that, future growth that would kind of be in the way, maybe, possibly. And, being that this is kind of a natural area, this portion of the school is already developed, this seems like the most logical solution, and the most beneficial to both parties.
And I understand that you're still in discussion with Shannon. So when are you looking, it's July. Are you talking about doing this summer?
No,
Next
the-
summer? I hope not during the school year.
No, and
No.
that's what we discussed as well. We want to make sure that we're looking out to the future. So the city is requiring us to procure this construction easement and this utility easement, so that we could get, our finals on our second phase, right? Because as it goes, we create more impervious surface, obviously we have to have the holding ponds in place. Second phase doesn't really trigger this pipe going in, only third phase does, but they want us to procure this easement prior to giving us the approval on final approval on second phase. It's preliminary platted, and it's overall, the overall subdivision is approved, but it goes into final plat approval with each phase of the project.
And about how many houses are in each phase?
There's roughly 40. Right now, we're kind of grouping them into 40 because, we don't want to get too far ahead. We don't want to do too big of chunks and have vacant lots. That's just, that's not in anybody's interest. So our phasing right now is roughly 40 lots, a phase. First phase is in, that was 40 lots. Second phase is 39 lots, so just one short of 40.
Shannon, would it be possible to have more, I don't want to say third party, but an engineer more on our end look through these same plans that wouldn't be through necessarily what they're giving, but to make sure that we are covering our end as far as future growth on our campus and how those, where they're going into, how that could affect us in the future. I just want to make sure that that's a large area, that's a lot going on as far as making ourselves, when we say it's beneficial to both, I think that I would feel more comfortable than getting some of that information from, if we look at that versus someone kind of telling us that it would be beneficial.
And now that we have Wold on board, they'll be a great resource for that.
It's also important to maybe understand too that, we're absorbing the cost of putting it in, which is extensive, but also in our development agreement with the village, we bond the project and then they inspect it with the city engineer. And then we turn it over to the city on completion. So then the city maintains that just like they do the rest of the storm on your site or anything that's connected to a public right of way or a roadway. So it is.
So if you didn't put it through the district's property, what would you do?
We're done. We go home and subdivision stops.
There's nowhere else to run that?
Nope. No, but, this conversation should have been had, but was never asked to have been had under the previous leadership. So it was like, yep, that looks good, and it was all just, we were at meetings, we described it, we put it into place, and it was never brought to our attention that there's an issue, a problem, a board meeting that we need to go to, any approvals that need to be done. It was basically, he said it's good, it's good. Even the state, the county, we have to go through all these very lengthy and expensive approvals. And everybody came back and everybody's good. We're all good, here you go, here's your final plat, here's your preliminary plat. And so it kind of blindsided us a little bit. coming in and,
I did that.
yeah.
I mean, this is
Right.
a big project and nothing that I was going to
And so
approve without awareness of the board and
Yeah, I mean,
some
it was-
bigger next steps.
I would assume there's some financial consideration, I mean, running that across the property. I mean, I just think if we never developed that and we wanted to sell it, what does an easement across there do to resale? We talked about baseball fields there in that referendum discussion, what does that do if that ever came? Those are kind of my thoughts. I know there's no answer to that tonight, but.
Yeah. So those are things all on my list that I need to make sure before we would sign anything, enter into a contract, et cetera, because there are some pieces, right? We have a farmer that we rent the fields to, there's some coordination there. I mean, there's just, we have the prairie, if you remember that wouldn't be touched necessarily on this, but there's just multiple things that, and this for me was phase one, was at least putting on your radar that these conversations are happening and just some next steps of that, so.
And by no means were we trying to get by with anything. We were told green light go, and now it's not green light go.
Fair, yeah.
So I'm here to just kind of help educate, the board and continue working with Shannon to get to something that's reasonable and in a timely manner, because it's holding us up. Time is money, and we have contracts that we gotta fulfill with, home builders and whatever. So it's a sensitive thing. It's something that the city's making sure that we address now, afterthought, like, okay. So we're just here to try to, put our heads together to get to a solution.
Did the village hire their own, or does the village have their own engineers who looked at it to make sure that it
Yes.
was okay as far as they were concerned?
Absolutely, and I can send you all the state approvals, the county approvals, and the city or the village engineer firm that approves and double checks everything that's there, and then the engineers that we hire. The engineers that we hire, Carlson McCain, to design the entire project, make sure it meets all the state codes and all the stuff that we discussed in the preliminary and final plat, with the city or the village, I keep saying city, sorry. And all that stuff, lengthy, detailed, expensive process to develop something and get it, to move forward. And, this was a very, very looked at by the village engineer, our engineer, and then obviously signed off on by the county and the state. So
I'm sure it's.
we're kind of blindsided a little
It
bit.
seems like it's the right thing, I get it, it seems like it's approved, just someone forgot to get the approval from the landowner, right? That's kind of what it is?
We had a blessing, but I guess it wasn't a blessing.
Right.
I guess it was, and then, you moved on and, we come to go get our final stuff and they're like, well, hey. I'm like,
It's possible that Mark did give all those reports to Vaughn or somebody at Wold in the past. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know either. I really don't know.
But
I just know that
Wold was involved.
I've had many meetings with him, and either on the site or at the village hall or even here. And we talked through multiple things, that was one of them. So. Any other questions?
Just timeline wise, when would you want to do this?
Well, the actual construction, the easement portion of it, we'd want to get in place like right away, because we can't get our final approval to finish up what we're doing over there, get that
You need
second
that
phase.
easement. That's
I need the easement. The actual construction portion of it probably wouldn't happen until, I don't know, after school's out next year, so, still.
It's the easement that you're.
Yeah, the village is requiring the easement prior to giving us approval on our second phase.
When would second
Click,
phase?
tuck, tuck.
Do you have a date that you're looking at beginning phase 2?
We're already working on the mass grading portion of phase 2. And so, and then, going through some issues on phase 1 because of the power line situation and stuff. We're mitigating those, getting those redrawn, kind of working through those issues because of the XL Energy and, they're unwilling to, go as the plan was designed, which kind of is in our favor, probably in the school's favor a little bit, because we're probably gonna keep more of that hillside there on this side of the subdivision. So let's get them redesigned now, and we'll get that all, done and work completed there. So the dirt work portion of phase 2 is done, but I can't go into any more of it until, we can't do streets or pipe or road or anything like that until we have what, you know, the final plat, which is all in, the counties, you know, and the city and the village have, you know, all their feedback in, all the comments are done, all that stuff's ready to go. So the last item on the list is this and the redesign for this area where the hill is on this side of the school, which we should be getting from our engineer and being reviewed by the village engineer in the next, about 10 days roughly is what I've been told, so. Well, we're also sharing that information with, you know, Shannon as well as soon as we get it. We had a meeting with, you know, Gunther and her and myself and Brian. We had, you know, a meeting just kind of, hey, what's our path forward and what does the school want to see, you know, what can we do to, so.
But the next meeting or the one after, you're probably gonna want some action? We meet every other week?
Yeah, I think so. Our next step is,
We need to set up a
we're
meeting
gonna set up a
with the
follow-up
ownership
meeting
group
with
there.
the owner group
Yeah.
and the village, and so I can give you an update soon. Mhm.
Does that answer everybody? Well, sure it doesn't answer everybody's questions, but if that's it, then.
Were there other items that?
Well, he just touched on where it says walking path. We just had some discussions about, if you remember a few meetings ago, I talked about the hill in the back and wanting to maintain the hill as is, not cut the hill down in any way. But trying to get creative, how do we develop some safe walking paths for the children in that development to get here, so they're not jumping over the hill and doing all those things. So that's kind of the next piece of what we're just trying to figure out.
Yeah, we'll have
How to make that work.
engineers drafting, just because of all the requirements they have to meet, different slopes and, you know, different things that the village wants to see. They don't really want to see any retaining walls because of, you know, graffiti maybe or whatever. So we're working through those items and we'll have like a redraw on that little section that, you know, the village engineer and ourselves, and then we'll, you know, kind of know that it can be accomplished and this is doable. Keeping in mind that maybe moving one of the walking paths, maybe putting it out on the end. You know, she gives good input on, you know, really don't want them coming in on the backside over here into a parking lot. That's probably not the safest thing, but, so we took all that in consideration and they're working on it and gonna have us kind of like a redesign for that area, keeping in mind that we want to kind of keep, you know, the hill there as much as we possibly can. So we hope to have that here in 10 days or so, and then I'll share that with you and give you guys a chance to kind of look at it. We'll, you know, obviously we'll talk to, you know, Bob and the village and go from there.
Great. Anything
Thank
else?
you.
All right? If that's
All
it?
right, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll talk to you, I'll call you tomorrow maybe,
Sure.
or email you.
Sounds
Thank
great,
you.
yep.
Appreciate you.
Big giant sliding hill, just take your sled to school.
Okay, moving on with our, Shannon, do we want to stay, oh, he's, there it is. Okay. So moving on with our policy review, we are looking at the 25-22 library media centers. It was sent to us, the initial kind of different raw 3 options that were originally given from Neola. And you know, it was requested at our last meeting that let's take a look at this. Do we want to change anything? What are kind of our next steps to go forward in the midst of the book requests and things going forward? So if you guys make sure that you have the one open that has all of the options, because I know there's a couple in mine, and then that has like comments kind of on the side as well. But it's the raw policy before that gives the option 1, option 2, and then option 3.
Alicia emailed it to all of us. Do you remember what day that was, Alicia?
Not off the top of my head.
It was right
Or
after
if you
the
look
last
in your Google
meeting,
Docs.
So like June.
Yeah, Google Docs, it's policy 2522
June 21.
library media essentials.
June 21, 11:29 a.m.
So currently, those 3 options, we were going off the majority of option 3, is that correct?
Do we currently have?
What we currently are using.
Right. And I don't know if you wanted to start with
Yeah,
Trevor?
do we wanna,
Kind of
Trevor's
just-
here, so if you want to maybe
Yeah.
kind of give, we just thought with some of the changes that we're making sure we're going through in the correct manner and making sure that we're kind of covering ourselves too to any changes that we might make to policy in the midst of what is happening, that we kind of have some, I know a lot of times we've sat like, oh, well, can we do this or can we not do this? So now we have some consult that we can use as we're going through our discussions today. So welcome.
Thanks. You want me to stand here?
Sure.
Or to be able to present me? Okay. All right, well, thank you first of all. Thank you for inviting me here. I have looked a bit at some of these policies, and I wanted to give just a little bit of an overview. This is something that we're seeing more and more of. We're seeing challenges to books in a library, and there are a couple of things that I want to say first off, just to make sure everybody's clear on the same thing. We are not talking about curriculum. We're not talking about changes to curriculum. We're not talking about challenges to curriculum. Those are very clearly outlined in state law and in your policies, how a parent challenges or opts out of certain curriculum. So we are putting curriculum completely aside, and we are talking only about the materials that are available in the library. And challenges to library materials. The first thing you have to know is you don't have to have a policy on this at all. This is not one of those areas of state law that it is required. The required portion for any kind of a challenge for parents is to curriculum. Because when you think about it, curriculum is required. Curriculum is something kids have to do versus any material in the library is optional. And so foundationally, just know that if you decide to have a policy that allows parents to challenge books in the library, that is completely up to you. You could decide we're not going to allow it at all. That this isn't something that we're going to do because it's not required by law. So starting from that position, understanding that this policy is how you are creating it, that there isn't a law that says what has to be in it, what doesn't have to be in it, not even a law that says you have to have it. There are a couple of things I want to make sure everybody is aware of. There is a United States Supreme Court case that has decided this issue definitively. In 1982, there was a case out of New York. It's called Island Trees Union Free School versus PICO. And in that case, what happened is several school board members were a part of a committee. They decided to, the committee actually recommended to the board that they remove 2 books, that they keep 5 or 6 books. What happened was the school board ultimately decided, hey, let's just take them all out. These don't really fit with our values. We don't like them. Let's take them all out. And what happened there was the students sued the school district and said, this violates our First Amendment right to free speech because you are removing books, you are removing ideas from the library. And the Supreme Court agreed and said that the school board had violated that. The school board was thinking about things like good taste, relevance, and appropriateness to age level. They ultimately looked at a number of these things, and the court, what they held was local school boards may not remove books from school library shelves simply because they dislike the ideas contained in those books and seek by their removal to, quote, prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion. So basically what they have said is students have a First Amendment right to access materials, and that you cannot remove materials from a library based on religion. You cannot remove materials from a library based on nationalism, on orthodoxy in politics, and other matters of opinion. So that's where we start from. Knowing, first of all, you don't have to have any right to, there's no right to challenge books in the library, to remove books in the library. These are optional resources. And then you have the United States Supreme Court saying, if you're gonna do it, you better do it for a pretty darn good reason, and these aren't it. And then you start looking at state law. State law talks about things like, state law talks about you're required to provide adequate instructional materials which reflect the cultural diversity and pluralistic nature of American society. That's 121.021H. You are supposed to, in Wisconsin Administrative Code, Public Instruction 8.01, you are supposed to provide library facilities with a current balanced collection of books, reference materials, which depict in an accurate and unbiased way the cultural diversity and pluralistic nature of American society. These are the laws that govern you as a board whenever you're considering these types of things. You have to have the cultural diversity, pluralistic nature, and students have a First Amendment right to the freedom of ideas. When you're talking about library materials, especially when you're talking about this type of policy, it's important to think about those things and have those as your fundamental ideals as well. Because when we're talking about, and this is something I've seen all over, that people get really upset, and I don't know if that's happened here or not, but people get really worked up, really upset about we need to remove materials from the library or we don't need to remove materials from the library. So there's a lot of emotion on this issue. We're talking about kids. We're talking about parents trying to protect their kids. So when you're thinking about those things, you have to kind of take a step back and say, we need to get out of the emotion of this moment. We need to not think about the, 25 books that we are still looking at. Because you as a board, what are you? You're a policy setting body. You're forward looking. That's your job. You have to set a policy that's going to stand for 20 years, not for the next 6 months. So when you think about that, you want to think about like what would make the most sense for your policy to look like? What would make the most sense for your policy to say? And when you think about that, obviously you have a few options to consider here. Things I would look at, has there been a problem with the existing policy? If there's a problem, how do we fix it? What can potentially be ways there to fix it? As you look at some of these issues, again, you're forward facing. You're looking at how should this be? Knowing we don't have to do this at all. Knowing, that really those student First Amendment rights are really important, something we really have to consider. And the other thing I would say too, just on a foundational level, and then I'm absolutely gonna stop talking and let you ask questions. We haven't seen yet, I expect that it will come, but we haven't seen the lawsuit on this yet, where parents said, I'm suing you because you did not remove items from the library. I fully expect that it will come at some point. However, that lawsuit has no real basis. It's not a First Amendment right to the students of that parent because they don't have to see it. They don't have to read it. So it's not a forced, it's not a compelled speech type argument. So where they would say, you're forcing my child to believe in a certain thing, you're forcing my child to read a certain thing. We're not talking about curriculum. We're talking about optional books in the library. And I know, because we've talked about this a lot, I've talked with your administration about this, I know that you've already protected yourself against that by having discussions saying, if parents say their kids can't have a book, they can't have the book. And to me, that solves pretty much the entire issue. Is you could say, and you can consider this, and something you can think about moving forward as you're thinking about this policy in conjunction with what are we going to do practically. Saying that students can't get the materials without parental permission doesn't really violate any laws. Wouldn't necessarily violate the First Amendment rights of those students because the parents are still speaking for the students. The lawsuit would basically be against their own parents instead of us, because their parents are the ones that are preventing that. And we know students don't, kids don't sue their parents very much unless they're Hollywood actors. So really, that's the best middle ground that you can come up with without violating any laws is, okay, if you don't want to check out materials, if you want to opt in and say, for instance, and this might be going too far, but you want to say, if your child wants to check out anything from a library, it has to be clear with you first. I'm not sure what the how that would work from your electronics, you know, if your system would allow for that. But that's absolutely something you consider. You can consider some kind of consent at the beginning of the year where you say to parents, can your kid check out books from the library, or does everything have to be cleared through you? And you've solved the problem. You've solved any problems that there would be, because now these parents know that every single book that my kid wants to check out, I get to look at and I get to review, while also not violating the First Amendment rights of other students to the freedom of ideas and the freedom of information. So to me, not necessarily policy, but that's more of a practice thing where, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you consider something like that? Now I think that's really more of an administration question than a board question, because you're a policy-making body and that's more of a practice. But those are the kind of initial thoughts that I have when I'm looking at and thinking through a lot of these things. On the actual, and I promise I'm going to let you ask some questions, but the last thing, when I'm looking at the policy, I see a couple of different options that include creating a standing committee that's basically going to run this. And if you wanted to create a standing committee, there's one piece of information you should really be aware about as you're thinking about it. If you create a standing committee of the board by policy, they will be subject to the open meeting law, which means that people who aren't board members will now have to give notice and hold these meetings in public to have these discussions. And I think that from what I've heard from parents over the years and what I've heard from people who are on these committees over the years is that would be an extremely bad idea. And the reason why is people don't feel comfortable getting up and saying, this is why I want this book banned. This is what I don't like about this book. And you would now be setting that parent up to have to come into an open meeting where anybody could come in and listen and hear what they had to say. And the flip side of that is, I've had parents who've served on these committees that said, I don't want my name to be known. I don't want anybody to know that I'm on this committee or that I'm a part of this. No, I think that's a little too far in the other direction. But people aren't going to want to do it. If they know that they're potentially going to have to give 72 hours notice of a meeting, it's got to be scheduled here, it can't just be we all made this work with our schedule. So that's another thing to think about on these options, whether you want to have one of those options that creates a standing committee that essentially is going to have to follow the open meeting law and is going to be bound by a lot of that. They couldn't just say, oh well, let's pick up again tomorrow, let's take the rest of the afternoon off and think about it. No, it would have to be, you'd have to publish the public notice and you'd have to go through all those proceedings as well. So just another thing to think about. With that, I've promised it a couple of times. What questions do you have? What do you want to ask about?
I have questions.
I do too. Yeah, I just have a couple. Yeah.
Yeah.
You go first. All right, so the first one is, the Supreme Court's already ruled on it. And what you just described about all of this policy, why would we even have this policy to begin with? But doesn't it just muddy the water for us? I mean, until the Supreme Court either has a challenge to this case and overturns it or upholds it, why even have a policy?
Now that's a policy question for you guys. You get to decide whether or not you have this policy. That's what you guys do. It's your question on policy. The one area I would say, there are times when there are mistakes. Mistakes are made, you correct them. You say, wait a minute, why is this high school book in the elementary? None of us noticed it, no idea how it got there. You ask around, people say, I don't know, what's it doing here? How did it get here? So there's a level of a check that you're getting in that process, and the vast majority of these too, when you have this kind of a process set up, there's already a language for it. So parents can say, oh, I want to talk to the librarian, what's this doing in here? The librarian says, I have no idea, we're going to remove it. And it's done. It doesn't get to the level of you go to the next step, you go to the next step, you go to the next step. So in some respects, I think there is a benefit there. It is a check. It does allow for you to say, there are absolutely reasonable grounds on which to remove books from the library, and they generally are that it's not appropriate for the age level. That, for instance, you look at all of the reports on a book and it says the age range for the readers is 16 to 20, that it's that reading level, it's not appropriate at the elementary school. No one's going to be able to read it. So, ultimately that's a policy decision, but to some extent, if you decided to get rid of this and not have book challenges anymore, that's something that you could do.
Well, Michelle Lesha was here a meeting or two ago and said she did exactly that way before we had this policy and was able to resolve the issue satisfactorily. You said a couple of things that I wrote questions about while you were talking. You were talking about the option. There's something in the state law about the age of 16, about parents getting information about what books their kids check out. But they can only do it if their child is younger than 16. So if we have this opt-out option available through Infinite Campus, can it be for all students, or does it have to be only until age 16?
And that is something I would have to look at more closely. However, that's something that we do right now with kids who are 18. Because all of the rights have passed to the parents. They sign a sheet of paper saying, I give my parents the rights, and it's solved.
Yeah.
So that is absolutely something you could still consider at that point, is getting that express permission from the student and the parents signing off on a form saying, we still want this to apply. But the specific law and how it would interact, I haven't looked at that.
That's something that we might want to check before we enact whatever policy we enact, or not policy, procedure we enact. Would it be reasonable to have this option posted, for example, in the student handbook, on the district website, make it public during open house nights, so that parents are aware that this option is available, and if they would like to implement it, they need to go on the district website and sign off on it, much as they do for their children to participate in sports.
I think that's exactly what I would foresee this as. And my example was, this is like the directory information policy. Parents sign off on it at the beginning of the year saying, I'm opting my kid out of directory information, because otherwise name, age, participation in sports, all that's public on kids. At the beginning of the year, parents get this opt-out, that basically saying, so that's how I would envision it, that it would be like that type of thing, but it could really be however it made the most sense to get people the information, because you would want people to know this is your process if you want a process.
And it would be for the parents who want to have that control.
Yeah, I really would, because I think your default is kids can, if kids are reading, great.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
Like if they're going to get a book, wonderful. So
Yeah.
I think that if parents wanted more control, then I think that's got to be the more of the, like, we're stepping forward and saying, no, we don't want this, as opposed to the other way, because I wouldn't want to put barriers up for kids or families who want to just access materials.
Great, good. I think that's all the questions I have at this moment.
That type of database would never be subject to communication requests, would it? If a parent wanted their children opted out, could someone else ask for that data?
No, it really should be considered private educational data.
Parents' information
on a
and
student.
child both?
The parents might be a little more of a tough call, because we don't have a law that specifically says that all parent data, but for the most part, that type of thing where you're making a specific, choice about something, it's not exactly clear, and, in general, parents don't have many rights to privacy, but anything tying it to the student for sure would be, have to be redacted or not a part of it, and you could do a balancing test at that point. Under state law, there's a balancing test that you look at 4 factors on, is this something that we should share or not? And I think that would be the type of thing, kind of like our, information opt-out for FERPA, for directory information under FERPA. Probably the type of thing that would almost never in the balancing test be out, that kind of a form.
But also, it would be a form that they could fill in right on Infinite Campus, so there would be no emails involved.
Right.
And typically, our open records requests have been for emails. You're eliminating emails.
Right. Good. Yeah, because generally when someone makes a request for Infinite Campus stuff, that's all private. No one gets to see a screenshot of what they have on their Infinite Campus, who their emergency contacts are, what their, class schedule, stuff like that is all private on students.
Can I ask a question just for?
We can't, sorry.
The other thing I was looking at here, I know that you have this as a first read. I don't know, and obviously you guys get to decide, I don't know that you're ready to have a first read tonight and a second read in a week or two on this. So even though you've listed it as a first reading, that can be your opportunity for discussion. You can always bring it back for a second first reading after you make those changes. Just wanted to make sure you knew that you do have that option.
So if we don't put it on the next agenda for a second reading, it automatically starts over within first reading, whenever we so choose.
And what does that do for the current process? So we have these books that are, kind of sitting in limbo. Like, if we drag this out, does that create any problems with how fast we need to move on this?
Yeah. Well,
appeal?
remember the first thing I said, we don't have to do it at all.
Right.
So there's no law or guidance that says, we have to do it within a certain period of time. What I would say, if this policy, if we change it, because it's all discretionary, you can change it and say, this is what we're gonna do for the next 20 or 25, because you have that authority. So it's really kind of a decision on if you wanna change it, what it's gonna look like, and is it gonna be forward-facing and only apply to future ones, or will this be the process we're gonna start using right now? And those are all areas of discretion that you guys get to decide.
One of the things I know that's come up, just talking about, I know kind of piggybacking off what Matt said, is that do we have to worry about, I know we could change this, but like legally, as far as just changing it with all of that, are we putting ourselves at risk? Because we've started this process when a policy was put in place originally, and then if we change it at this point, are we holding ourselves liable in any way?
Yeah, and I'm always a little loath to give full-throated legal advice
Yeah.
in a public setting. But what I
I know that just,
and
I mean,
I was gonna say, I'm comfortable enough telling you that because this is such an area of discretion, there is no existing legal claim that someone could bring against you saying they're not following their policy. People try, trust me, people try, but that kind of claim that they're not following their own policy loses again and again. Why? Because it's your policy. Because you can change it anytime you want. So this isn't one of those areas that you have to follow state law on X, Y, and Z. You can change this policy now and it can be effective right now. Well, you can't change it now based on your procedures, but you could change it and say this is what it's gonna be going forward, and you're not really setting yourselves up for any legal liability because there's no cause of action saying, hey, they're not playing fair.
Mark or Sheree, anybody else have questions specifically? Okay, so continuing in this conversation, I guess as a board, how do we want to move forward, or what specific, if we are looking at changing our current policy that we have, or altering our current policy, I guess
My opinion would be to formalize or finalize a procedure, whether it's an Infinite Campus, and when that's in place, get rid of this policy completely. That would be my opinion.
Shannon, would you and your administrative team be able to have a procedure ready to present to the board July, is it the 24th?
Yes,
yes.
we can make it happen.
I'm all for it.
What about the policy?
Yeah,
Get rid of it?
oh, yeah.
So would, putting it on Infinite Campus, would that be a real thing? That's a possibility?
We can start having discussions tomorrow. What that's.
Well, and I know it's got brought up, and I know Ian has like, and not necessarily an opt-in or opt-out, but making it a broad, you make it broad through Infinite Campus. You're not singling out necessarily that parents need to then put in the request that they don't want the books. You're putting it to everybody. So this isn't singling out one group.
We're doing the student handbooks tonight. Can we also have it added to the student handbook, some kind of little statement about this is available to parents who would like it?
I mean, I see this, I'm looking off screen. I see this similar to like a media opt-out, right? Like for parents who choose, they do not want their kids on any Facebook, on our, they don't want them to be identified whatsoever. We have that list as an office. We have that list as like, so that we know that we're not posting any kids whose parents do not want them to be posted. That list goes nowhere. So I guess I see it looking something similar to that, where we could put it there. Perhaps it could become part of like the online, the re-enrollment and the annual update that all parents and families have to do. Like, we just have to look to see technologically what that could look like. But I see it very similar to a media opt-out.
And that's on Infinite Campus?
No,
That's-
that
that's
one
in
is
the
not,
office.
because it's really not as common anymore as it once was. When the phones and the pictures and the websites were real new, it was much more common. I would have a list, quite, a substantial 20 kids. I don't know that I've had a kid whose parents have opted them out in the recent past. So, that's not something that we would, it's available, it's in our handbook, but we don't necessarily advertise it or require it.
Yeah,
Right.
so if we did the same thing where it's available, it's in the handbook.
Mhm.
Another question, so just going back, Trevor, real quick, so you had said, if we got rid of this policy completely and someone found a book in the elementary library, essentially they would go to that staff member, right, like past practice was, but there's no appeal process, there's no, it's a kind of a informal conversation, like what would that look like?
Yeah, and I think, one thing to think about too is there's more to this policy than just the challenge. So I'm not sure that you would get rid of the entire policy, but maybe just revise the challenge portion. I know that I probably was too sweeping in that. I just want to make sure that you have stuff in there like your criteria for selection and those types of things. I could see you either completely removing that reconsideration of school library materials or having it be that you can speak to the librarian if you have concerns about it. And that's where, where it would end. Because I think that's generally what it's gonna look like in practice. And then you also, if you're really gonna do this opt-out, that should cut out almost all of the issues anyway. So I think that it would probably look something like that it would be an informal procedure, or we could include some language about what the informal procedure is gonna look like.
And then Brandon, maybe a question for you. Is it possible, so you had kind of mentioned, basically approving a book. Is it possible to build that into your checkout system where a parent gets notification and has to approve it? I mean, obviously, a student can't get a book same day, kind of makes a mess of things, but is that even a real thing?
Not seamlessly.
Not with what you have?
No, I'd have to email.
You would have to, or the staff would?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So, do we know how many schools locally within, I know Hudson does, they have their reconsideration of library materials committee, a review committee. Do we know what other schools locally have that? Are there more that don't?
You mean like a committee like we currently have right now?
So this one includes parents, learning administrative representative, one principal or associate principal, a school counselor, and then two media specialists. So they are including all the stakeholders. So not just within the district admin.
Right. So what are you asking me? If
So-
other schools have committees?
Yeah, so I guess my question is, this isn't gonna be a one and done, here's the books we have in the library. Down the road, we're gonna have other books that are gonna be looked at to come in. Is there such a thing as having a review committee prior to them even coming in? So we have
Okay, so
representation
you're not
for
talking
decisions.
about a reconsideration committee, you're talking about a committee getting together, approving or looking at books before they come in.
Before they come in.
I would say I'm not aware of a committee existing in that form. I'm aware of committees existing like we have right now, and what you're describing, I think, for if there's a challenge. I'm not aware of a committee that exists to have stakeholders review or approve books before they come into a building. If that's what
So,
you're, if I'm
for
understanding
the
what you're asking.
reconsideration part, how many districts have parents involved in that? Is
I
that,
wouldn't be able to tell you quantitatively, I don't know. I would say I've looked at many policies and it is all over the place. Some have parents, some have no parents, some have a parent and a community member, some have just community. I mean, it's, I wouldn't say
everything.
there's a one size fits all. I know you work with multiple districts too. I feel free to speak up, but that would be my experience just looking at a variety of policies, that it looks different everywhere. Mhm.
And I would say, I think people have been caught a little flat-footed and are digging out their library, like dusting off materials from the 90s, saying, well, this is what we wrote in 1995. You know, and so practices are all over the place.
Are we able to then put, sorry, Brandon.
No, you can't see me and see me.
No.
Just kind of on that, I know we had talked about, when we purchase library materials, posting that, like website or whatever, on the students. So like, I'm working on now the list for last year's 22-23 library materials will go out, so parents can read what was added to the library, that way they don't have to go searching for it themselves.
Oh, okay. So that would be available.
Correct.
I know it had come up as a concern that, you know, parents opt out, but that's not in policy, so is that something, you know, that we could write?
That would be a
if-
procedure, and, or. we-
Or,
if
I mean,
we-
I just putting it in policy that parents have the right to opt out.
I
Or
think
go to
that-
handbook, right? Isn't that the better spot for it?
Well, if we use what Trevor suggested and just keep the policy, but just take out the entire section of reconsideration, one of the comments I made on the policy was to add the option of what we've been talking about, the opt-out, adding that language to this policy. Here it is. I'd like adding these accommodations. Shannon had written a couple of accommodations. And I commented, I like adding these accommodations to the policy. And then one of my questions was about the 16-year-old thing.
Mhm. So is that how you would envision this, policy versus handbook? Is one better or worse? I know you had that reaction when they first said it, that's why I'm asking.
It's a decision for the board. I prefer having less in policy and more in procedure. Just because I think that once you start writing your policies to death, like you forget about them, you have so many, you don't know half of them. You know, versus if you have it as a procedure, if it's in the handbook, it's pretty clear it's gonna happen every year.
So
But-
don't even mention it in the policy?
You know, I think that if we were gonna do something like that, we would have to wordsmith a bit, but we could say something like, administration has the authority to take actions to, you know, to assure that parents are given options, or, you know, something like that, where we would allude to it, but we don't have to change our policy every time technology changes,
Right.
or we change something else. So I would see it as giving, at most, it would be giving guidance to the administration saying, you should develop some kind of a procedure or practice around this.
I've heard some really promising public comment tonight. Gives me some hope. I guess I'd like to see where we land on that and then address this later.
Or we land on what?
Creating whatever system we,
The process.
whatever process is created.
Out of curiosity, what's the process to remove books? Like, over what time frame do you say, okay, this hasn't been checked out for X amount of years, it's no longer relevant to the library?
It's a general, very general, it depends on who you're talking to. My general thing is if it hasn't been checked out in 5 years, and if it was purchased 10 or published 10 years prior. And that's general. Sometimes it doesn't always go that way. Sometimes there's some books, like really classics that we still have in there, because some kid might not want to read them, or it's a very public, or very awarded book they keep in, but that's my general rule.
How often do you do that? That seems like quite the process.
Oh, we do it, we can, not every year, I mean, we did it before the renovation of the library, just to get some books off the shelves, and we just did it this year, so.
Do you run a report and?
Yeah, run a report, look at it, evaluate the books, see if it looks like something somebody might want to check out again,
Yeah.
and then get rid of it. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of books each year. Yeah.
I think going forward, I like when we said, not necessarily, I like, okay, we're not really at the step that we could just go right into a second reading. Just to look at more at that parents of students, the age 16 have the right to review, and make sure that we have that area covered as far as when we put that in, and then if we would need to go to that next step where then students would have to sign off that they're giving their parents that right, I think I would just like to have, you know, making sure.
And you'll confirm that? Okay. I agree.
So we can have, because I know that
Just
that
to know
was
the
one
answer.
of the, you know, one of the concerns is, so how that, I mean, if we have them sign off on something else, then are we able to do that?
So can we have this procedure brought to our next board meeting?
Yeah, yep.
And you can, with that, some draft handbook language?
Yeah.
And I would be of the opinion that if the handbook language is good, and I think, as you say, wordsmithing this policy language, I think, well, why even do that? I agree completely. Less is better. So I would be of the opinion, as long as the handbook language is right and the policy, or the procedure's right, keeping it all, dropping the reselect, or that selection.
Keeping the policy and just dropping the entire section of restriction?
Yep, as long as there's a good opt-out policy or procedure, it's very clear and it's user-friendly and there's handbook language. Yep.
Okay.
I mean, if you're telling us that's what the Supreme Court, that is the current case, then yeah, I can't get behind anything else. Until that case is challenged and there's a change to it, you sit here as legal advice and you're telling us that's the law, then that's what I have to follow. I can't get behind anything else.
So if I'm hearing the board correctly, I will bring in the 24th handbook language regarding an opt-out, clear, user-friendly, I was just writing all the things you just said, to go into the handbooks. We can connect and follow up about the age 16 statute and the leeway and information there. Bring that on the 24th. More discussion.
And possible action.
Or potential action based on, okay.
And then at that point, would we have a little more discussion, or would somebody go through and strike all this and then bring this policy back in 2 weeks after that for a first reading? Because we want to wrap that policy up, right? I mean, as quick as possible?
Can't we just
Or do we do it all?
do it that night if
do
depending
it
on
the
the
24th.
information that Shannon brings?
Strike everything out and consider it another first reading?
Well, no, it would
We'd have to
be.
do the
It
first
would
reading
have
of
to
the
be a
next.
first reading again.
Well, it'd be it'd be a first reading.
No, it would be the second reading and we could take action on it.
Not unless we choose options, no.
No, because that can be our option. Our option can be to strike the entire section. And if our first reading is tonight and we want to make,
We have
That
to decide
is-
that tonight.
no, we don't have to decide it tonight. We have first reading and then we decide it at the second reading. There have been lots of times when we've had a first reading on policies and we've made changes at the second reading when we took action.
But in the event that something isn't right in 2 weeks, then we just
Then we can.
delay it.
Yes,
Okay.
then we don't have to.
So we just don't approve that second reading.
Right.
Okay.
Because we've sometimes said, I'll make a motion to approve policies A through H with the exception of D. And then that policy D is not approved and it comes back again
For a change.
for when we're taking action.
Right.
Yeah.
You would remove D from the motion so that you could make a change.
Oh, but sometimes we've made changes too.
And essentially, we're making the change right now.
Well, we're talking about the change.
Right.
And then we can make a final decision based on the
Mhm.
information that we
Mhm.
get on the 24th.
You don't like it?
I'm just not in a rush. I mean, we can deal with it. I'm not avoiding it. I just want to kind of see where everybody lands, I think we're in a good spot to find a common ground on it. I'm not, if we change the policy next meeting, or 2 meetings from now, or 3 meetings, what's the difference?
Well, the difference is a lot of payroll and extra time and extra meetings. I mean, do you remember all the data Shannon provided about what it's cost the district so far?
How often are you meeting?
Right now, we're documenting reading. We meet again in August.
So all the hours that they've spent reading the next 3 books, we're paying for. So that's a concern.
But ultimately, if it comes back in 2 weeks and the policy doesn't look right, we can just, we
Yes.
make changes and it comes back again.
Absolutely.
That's kind of what I'm saying, yeah.
But if we can get it cleaned up and bring it back and it looks good, then it's done. As long as that's okay.
Marge, what do you think?
I think that sounds good. We can delete that part. And then bring it back and talk about it.
And possibly take action on the 24th?
Yeah.
And Sheree? And Lacey? Wonderful. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Never?
Next up on our agenda, we have the high cost special ed support staff. Abby, do you want to speak to that at all, or did anybody have any questions with the memo that was provided with that?
No, you made it clear that we will be reimbursed at the end of the school year. Thank you. Will this come back then to the 24th for action, or is this an item that requires action?
I think we would love action. Abby, is that correct? So we could get this
Yeah,
posted?
if we could get it posted, good.
Mhm.
2 months. then we'll be
If that was possible.
Yep.
So bring it back to the 24th for action?
Could we do
Take action
action?
today, if somebody made a motion?
Kind of a bit of a tighter timeline than we anticipated.
And we can take action, right, even though it's not listed?
Yeah. I know.
This is a, I can't say too much, I don't want to identify the kid, but there's a reason why it's coming now, right? Like some of our students, we don't get notification that they're going to be coming to our district until they hit a certain young age, and then here they are. So we can't like know that they're gonna come in 2nd grade. So we get the notification and know that we're gonna need some support for that student.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the addition of a special education support staff for early childhood JK classroom.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I'm gonna abstain. It's not that I don't support it, it's just, I'm just gonna abstain.
Okay. So motion carries, right?
Yes.
Then moving on to our policy 151.2, the required student academic standards. This was also attached to us in a memo that is linked. If anybody has any specific questions for Trish, or Trish, if you have anything else that you'd like to say to this?
No, this is just your annual notice that we have to do the first meeting
it's just a notice.
It is a
doesn't
notice.
require anything.
It is, you have to approve the notice. It has to appear on a board agenda. It can be approved the next time.
There's no changes to that policy?
Every year, same
It's just
thing.
there.
Right, has to be on a board agenda, and then it'll be approved at the next meeting.
Okay, so this one will come back.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't think you could handle 2 of those, so you're good, just the one, just the one.
Lori's happy.
It doesn't need immediate attention. Okay, any other questions with that? Then moving forward,
Trent, you're in the back there.
any questions with the 23-24 Coach Advisor Handbook, which is also, or anything that you'd like to speak to that, Trent?
This is something that comes forward for the board annually, any changes are outlined on the memo.
Does anyone have any
Yeah, I
questions
do
regarding
have
those changes?
I had just a question about the banners. I gotta find it here. Photograph banners. And specifically listen here, using Cahill. So if a team wanted to use another photographer or do something different, can they? High school, any team, if they want to do their own fundraising banners, of some sort, and use a different photographer, they can?
So we have, I believe we have an agreement with Cahill to do all of our district photography for school, sports, activities.
What about the co-ops? What if a different, or do the other co-ops, they all use Cahill?
I don't know what the other schools do, but we're the host school for the co-op, so.
For all?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So it falls on us.
Yep.
Okay.
And how often do we look at that agreement that we have with Cahill? Do you know?
I wouldn't know.
Or
the answer
how
to that
we-
question. That's not my bobber.
When we've looked at
We've had a few
photographers in the
others,
past,
yeah.
it's been, usually it comes out of a cost thing or a dissatisfaction with product or something like that. There's no policy or anything that says you get, I don't believe a so many year contract with school photography. We did sign, we might be in like 3 years, Dave's not here, he could answer that question, but like, when we've gone through RFPs with photographers, like, we had one was like 1 year and it was a horrible product, we're like, you are not coming back, so it just kinda.
That was a school picture year, wasn't it?
It was a horrible year.
You
That was
never put those ones in the frame.
No, we sure did not put them in the frame. Not bad. That is so bad.
The reason I ask is kind of the crossover from the youth sports
Yeah.
to high school. Are they use Cahill? So is it a consistent product when it comes to the banners and stuff? Don't know.
So youth baseball uses Cahill.
Okay.
So youth baseball uses Cahill. I think some others might use NP out of Richmond. And some sports don't do youth pictures at all, right? So, and it just kind of depends.
I more so just wanted to have that in there, so as we transition coaches and have new people coming in, they know what the process is and they're aware of it. And then people aren't coming at me asking why they didn't get senior banners. So there's a process for it, so.
Got it.
Appreciate that.
So Trent, I see that you struck the non-sanctioned WIA state competition to reflect the current reality regarding our budget.
Yep.
So does that mean that associations, clubs, for example, FBLA, I don't know if we have FBLA.
So essentially what that means is
Forensics, we
any
have
of our,
forensics now, right?
any of our WIAA sports, when they qualify for state, make it to a state tournament competition, we still fund that because we get reimbursement from the WIAA to send our teams to that. Any of our non-WIA associated events or groups or teams or programs, we get $0 back from those associations.
So we're not going to state.
So, or if they want to, great, but they have to fundraise or pay for it or fund with the bill, and that's
We're
simply
not
just
paying
do our
for it.
budget reality.
Okay, got it.
Any other questions for Trent? Okay, then continuing on, we will go forward with our handbook updates. So we'll start with the all school.
Okay, so you get the memo with the link, the one with the overview of the changes. Dates, that sort of piece. We did update the dress and grooming a bit. We've had hats available in the middle school for the last few years. Due to earbuds and all the fun things, the kids are getting really good at hiding their stuff. We're gonna take it away. As the guy's hair also gets longer, they're really good at like hiding things underneath it. And so we're just taking it out as a middle school, but it appears in this part. And then we are working to make it more just gender neutral as far as like undergarments, and all body parts should be covered. Okay, I don't want boys wearing muscle shirts in the same way that I don't want to see bras and things like that, right? So that's what we talked about, so that's why you see what's struck through in there. Am I capturing that correctly? My cohorts, we talked about this together, I'm just speaking. So that's why we chose to make that change. And then we did add for emergency school closings, just given what happened this past winter. In the event of a severe snow season, large and unexpected inclement weather days, families will need to be prepared for students to complete learning from home. So we never had anything in there with the emergency closings before, but thought, you know what, if we end up having another winter, that'd be a good place to put it. And then page 17 then, with the new device protection plan, it was fee changes. We have better warranties on them now, so we're able to charge less per device per student. Screens and keyboards are a little cheaper to fix, so that just reflects dollar amount changes and years. So that's the overview of the all school.
Hats, back to hats.
Yeah.
All middle school, no hats.
Correct. Yep, we know.
Because it was 5th grade, no hats?
It was 5th, 6th this year. So the
7th,
only
8th,
kids that are gonna be upset at us, yes, you can tell them I'm sorry. You'll be okay.
Your life changed, right?
Except for special days. That's right. Special days. So, yes. Any other questions besides hats?
But this is all schools, so it
Yes.
pertains
Yes.
to.
Elementary,
all-
middle school, high schools, they can wear hats. That's why we have ES middle school
Oh.
only within there, right? Because high schoolers can wear hats. So,
Given what Sarah said, do you want to?
We have enough changes happening.
all right, and we will add, like, based on our conversation that just happened about the process, like media opt-out, we'll get that in here for the next read as well.
Thank you.
Can we move on to middle
Well,
school?
you wanna go in order? You wanna?
Well, I don't know what
we
they
can
have.
go in order.
I don't know what you guys have up next.
Yeah, let's go. Well, okay, I guess next was elementary.
Okay. Okay. So we didn't have a lot of changes. Really, my focus was just reading through it and making sure that we are capturing clarity. So attempted, the entering school and parent checking in and out. On page 1, we did add the actual age when you can get into junior kindergarten of turning 4 by September 1st, and also potty training. That was not on there, and checked in with neighboring schools, and it is in their page. And then we removed the line on for gifted and talented. And then going down, we just really talked about when a parent comes, what is that process? They go into the vestibule, and how do they bring things, and just trying to make it seem positive and clear. It kind of read with a lot of, well, you can't. I wanted it to be, welcome, here's our procedure. And it's kind of been in a work in progress since COVID and the new office and that area. I did have Kayla go over the healthcare area. Our book had said 72 hours, it's 24 hours, and so that was changed. On page 5, again, editing the parent pickup, still a situation, still wanting to remind parents to pull all the way up to the curb, where they will find their students. So, try to clarify that. Updated the months that parent-teacher conferences are. This year, it's actually the end of January and not February, so updated that. Also noted information that will be in the scoop. Talked about personal property, lost and found, where to find that, and then, finding things in the Spartan way, and then telephone calls. That whole section just kind of read kind of negative, like, you won't, and we just wanted it to be, we will make every effort to get back to you, more positively worded. questions on the elementary? Then you're next.
Oh, okay. Sorry. No, that's fine. I'm just getting a roll. So really minimal changes this year. Just some clarity with, people often ask, okay, who do I contact about attendance? So we put Becky's name in there, right? So they know who she is, right? Put the name with their face. We did have a door change. When we renumbered initially, we had skipped, so it's door 3, not door 2 anymore. And then just a little bit of change to parents or guardians. It just said parents before, and we have a lot of students who are not, it's not their parents, it's their guardian. And then I struck what was on page 5 because it appears in the all school handbook as well, and we needed that redundancy in both. So very minimal changes for ours this year.
I remember we took out all the names on purpose because people changed.
Yeah.
And now we're putting them back
Yeah,
in.
because people wanna know who.
Yeah.
Because the email address is attached, and so it gets messed up, because we can, and we also now allow, because they can email in
Yeah.
and say they're not gonna be at school, and so. That's all right.
So
Okay, well,
did
again, if we
you
need to
add
talk
the
about it.
name at the elementary school also?
We had it, we did it last year, was
Yeah.
our changes last year.
Andrew?
Yeah, I would say overall, I think last year being new, right, I didn't know what you do or not, and I think we just kind of combed through it, and I think there were more changes last year that, in my opinion, a lot slimmer this year. The ones that I think we did change are for tighter alignment in terms of what was in the handbook and what's going on in the high school, so cleaner language around Loud A, just so that we don't get to those wonders like we might have just at the end of past year, so just aligning that language, cleaning it up. And then in terms of the dress code, aligning to the all school handbook, as well as the alignment with marking and grading, but the largest change would be around the driving privileges, really looking at, again, with our current budget, and then also looking at what do all the surrounding schools charge, not charge, the scope of it, that would be the biggest change, is that there'd be a fee for parking.
So that, any question? That's brand new, correct?
Yeah, this is the new,
And that fee's consistent with everybody else neighboring?
so looking at the, I would say, middle, not even high end,
And where will those monies go to? What's the purpose of the fee?
I think again to help, look at the balance of the reduction of budgets that are pretty significant. And I'm not sure where that money is technically going to go, whether they're high school or general fund for the district, but.
Yep, probably the general fund.
Do you know what's the anticipated revenue?
I'm just gonna throw out like 200 cars at $40, right?
That you didn't go 200 cars is 40,000?
Yeah, 8,000.
And what if a student can't pay it? I mean, I know it's pretty minimal. What if, is there a process for somebody to say, hey, I just can't swing it, or?
It's like, that's not even what I thought we had. Similar to if you can't pay other fees, that you would reach out and we would work.
You could make arrangements?
Yeah.
They wouldn't be excluded from driving?
Correct.
We figure something out.
Yep.
So are they able to register multiple vehicles, their vehicle, mom's vehicle,
So,
dad's vehicle,
so
and then
it's on our
just?
handbook, and then on our side, we're navigating, like, how do we, what's your main car, other cars, license plate, here's their, just to keep it clean on our side, yep, because we write, like, the last thing we wanna do is sit and monitor the parking lot, but we wanna make sure it's safe and secure, so we're working on the backside of not making it overwhelming for kids and family, like my car's and I'm driving this other car, like, we have multiple cars that we would have in our database to ensure you're in your right lot, because I know, again, in general, where this came from is we were having issues with parking in general, causing transition flow in the morning and safety. So we took, in my opinion, a major step to clean that up, and this is a continuation of not making it a mess for kids and families and not making it a mess for us. So sorry, long answer to, yes, there would be multiple vehicles that they
Will
would
you
have.
do like a window hanger?
Yep.
Okay. So I can just move from car to car.
Correct, if they.
So mom leaves with the car hanger in the morning, kid has a car that is not registered, according to this, that could get towed.
Well, we have it in our paperwork procedure, like if that happens or whatever happens, to come into the office and talk to us to let us know that we will work with you.
Is there any other talk about, like, with, so what it, so it's an assigned lot, but not as an assigned space?
Correct. To offer a little bit more flexibility in terms of, we made our best choice this year where it was by spot. And
Yeah.
then we, again, to help with all of the things for students with us with monitoring, we feel that a lot approach would be a lot better than a spot approach.
Well, in particular in winter, when half the spaces or a quarter of the spaces are snow mounds.
Well, right, so then even as we anticipate not only winter, which we were prepared for, but now as we talk about breaking ground for this referendum, that we might lose parking spots and trying to get ahead with marking spots, the fluidity of looking ahead also to navigate potential loss of parking too.
So what does it look like for an elementary school program day and somebody parks there that doesn't know? I mean, you're not gonna be in the process of having cars towed regularly.
No, so right, so we've had many conversations with kids, right, as this was just new in general, but then, right, we got into this lot, the spot lock, and we have limited guest parking, and then we host the pre-K concert, and then, or students of the month breakfast. This will allow our flexibility on where we assign the number of cars in a lot. We're aware of guests and parents that may overflow our guest parking to accommodate that.
So that means that not necessarily everybody who wants a sticker will necessarily get one, because there may not be enough spots for every kid who wants one.
So we were able to accommodate everybody this year.
Yeah.
And so our goal is to accommodate everyone with the space we have. And so like, again, not only what we have currently to minimize safety, but then also trying to strike and look ahead at the other part, like we want it. And then also losing spots, we want to make sure we're accommodating everybody and not have someone left out. So we were able to accommodate everybody.
Even with the loss of.
Or this year, yep, and then we're hopeful to not with the loss of the referendum work.
I had another question about a different area. Does somebody else want to ask anything about driving privileges?
Yeah, do you want to keep going on as far as what you're kind of covering here?
I mean, I kind of already
You
did.
got it
like,
all?
the big
Okay.
change versus like
Okay.
what we're aligning. with.
Yeah, go ahead, Lori.
Under the academic recognition, in the past, when we've had changes, for example, the number of credits required to graduate, or another one that I can think of was the volunteer hours that were required. That changed for each grade level because of what happened with COVID. So in the past, when we've had changes like that made, it was done gradually so that the students who were affected or not affected, it reflected it for each grade level. So I'm wondering if the class that graduated this year, 23, is the class that's going to graduate next year in 24. Did they have the option of taking honors classes? And if so, should they be processed in as a gradual change, as we have done in the past for the number of credits required to graduate and the number of volunteer hours required to graduate?
Are you talking about like counting those as Laude points?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay. I've honestly lost track. I wouldn't know off the top of my head. We'd have to look back, I guess, and figure that out. I don't know.
When did this new system go into effect? Last year?
Prior to me getting here. And we're just aligning that.
So I think,
Yeah,
I
it'd be,
think 22, 23 freshmen were the first class of freshmen who didn't have the option of taking honors classes, is that right?
We didn't have honors this year, so I
Right.
know for sure this freshman group this year.
I honestly would have to look, I don't remember.
So
We
if
can look.
that's true, then maybe the class of 24 and the class of 25 and 26 for 1 year. Am I off on my years?
I think
don't
so.
know. I mean, if 26 were not able to take honors courses so if they're graduating in 24, they had both of them. If they're graduating in 25,
The freshman could.
they,
'Cause it
would
went
they
away
have
this
had
semester.
freshman and sophomore? No, just freshmen? I don't know, but you understand what I'm talking about, so you can look at that,
Yep, I understand.
okay?
Good idea.
How does the board feel about that?
I agree.
Well, that's what brought that public comment, right? That's kind of the same
Just to make
scenario.
sure it's laid out.
And in the past, we've, moved it with the kids, and I just think that would be appropriate. Thank you.
Any other questions for any of the handbook updates? Okay, then moving on to our superintendent updates.
All right, I have a lengthy list of all kinds of things to cover, so. Okay, so I'll start with, linked, you should have access to the memo, from Jody regarding remote work, and getting some language into our handbook, regarding, obviously coming out of COVID and it's almost 2024, and we know lots of organizations are trying to provide ways to get some flexibility for employees when appropriate and when it makes sense, and I would say our district is no different. I know Lori had brought this up at a once around the table maybe a month ago or so. So Jody and I had kind of worked together, looking at some other handbooks. Not a lot of schools have anything in their handbook about this, so we were kind of trying to find some examples, and we're running into a little bit of a brick wall there. So you can see what we have here as a recommendation, in italics there regarding at least getting something into the handbook. Not wanting to be too rigid and too prescriptive. Right now when this happens, and this does happen for all employee groups across our campus in a variety of ways, really it has been through the agreement between the staff member and their supervisor. We've had conversations administratively around maybe what that looks like, but wanting very intentionally not to put too many specifics, actually kind of like what Trevor was saying earlier, not too many specifics in there, allowing for some flexibility, and really if there is any remote work being done, that would be an agreement between the supervisor and the employee underneath my expectations and that I've outlined for our admin team. So this was kind of our first run at it in terms of getting something in there. If you maybe remember way back to the fall, when we were outlining some information from McGrath, that came out of the McGrath study as well, specific to school districts in terms of districts using kind of some leverage of allowing some remote work, again, when appropriate and when possible, to help recruit and retain employees. We're seeing that more and more as we've had over the course of probably, the last year specifically since I've been in this position, but, it's not uncommon for employees to put some requests around remote work, as part of some contract negotiations and those kinds of things. Of course, sometimes it works, sometimes it certainly does not, but we're trying to allow that to be built in, again, when it's appropriate and when it works, again, across all employee groups. You can see some information here too about some ways that this has been really beneficial to the employee and to the district, working through some ADA, working through some FMLA. In the past, for example, if we had teachers come in the summer to maybe write curriculum, that just by the nature of how it worked, you'd have to come in and sit in the classroom, and now those are some things that we can do remote, and we want to be able to offer that to our employees. So happy to take some feedback. Again, what you see there was just kind of our first shot at trying to get some language in the handbook, at least just as a start.
I have a couple questions. Should there be some language in there about the student contact? So, you know, I fully support a teacher in the summertime when there's no expectation, but does this kind of open the door to say school day when there should be student contact, they can work remote? I don't really see anything addressing that.
Yeah, so you're right. I would say that's never come up. You know, really it has been, when you look at kind of each different employee group, like support staff, for example, you know, they're here when students are here. So that becomes difficult to request a remote work day for a support staff. But we've allowed that flexibility on inclement weather days to be able to still, to get paid on those days. You know, teachers, right, during the school year, it's really not an option, although we have had some teachers utilize it again through FMLA and through ADA and some things that have come up. But those have been unique circumstances, not just, it's a Friday, I'm gonna tune in today on the smart board, you know, that kind of thing. So it's not specifically addressed. I guess for me, it's kind of outlined by any remote work is established through, you know, an agreement with the supervisor. So I can't imagine a scenario where any of them would say, yep, but I see what you're saying. I mean, it's, those specifics aren't necessarily addressed. You know, I'm happy to put more in, but.
My other question was like number of days. So I think summertime, you know, a lot of places now have gone to back in the office 2 or 3 days a week. You know, is there a benefit to saying, like, we want to give this to you, but there's got to be some limitations so that someone doesn't just work remote for the month of June?
Yeah, so we've talked about that. We've had some internal discussions about how formal to make it. You know, this kind of, obviously last summer was my first official summer, but not really knowing any different. I'm kind of counting this summer as my first real summer. That, you know, some of those have just been informal conversations. It has not been an issue in terms of something that I feel has been abused, or something that, man, I haven't seen so-and-so in 2 weeks, you know, where are they, kind of a thing. So there are some districts that I know, you know, have some of those tighter parameters in place that, you know, up to 2 days per week or something like that. You know, initially, as this is kind of rolled out a little bit more, you know, I've allowed it to be a little bit more flexible just based off of, you know, employee situation, or if they're working on a specific project where maybe it's, you know, 2 full days of nothing but computer work, and doing it at home is very reasonable and acceptable. So I don't think you're wrong by, you know, suggesting maybe we put something in there. We certainly
No, as long as
we can.
As long as you've addressed it and you feel comfortable, that answers my question. I'm good.
Yeah, and you know, it actually doesn't happen as often as you might think, because many people still prefer to work in the office. You know, I'll just use this office as an example. You know, we've got 2 screens and a much nicer setup. Even I don't prefer to work at home, but I don't have my same setup at home, and so we just try to have professional conversations of, hey, might it work on this day if I work remotely? And yep, that works okay. We can click buttons in any of the buildings, frankly, but again, here, because the staff works all year long, and so does some of our office staff in the other buildings, but just with a click of a button, voicemails can go right to cell phones. I mean, so there's immediate access through phone or by email, and that's one of the expectations I've laid out, that if you're going to be working remotely, you have to be as available as you would be if you were, you know, sitting in your workspace. So,
do we have any additional expenses to provide that work from home setup?
No.
They've got a laptop and
yep,
you get your own
anything.
desk, your own
Yep.
additional monitor, whatever that might
Yep. Yep.
So when it says remote work agreements will be established in accordance with the guide that people are being approved, is that like on a daily, like, may I work, you know, does it work for me to work from home, or is it just an agreement in general?
I would say the agreement comes up as often as someone would maybe be requesting to work from home.
Okay.
So, you know, that isn't something that we would allow without prior conversation. You know, again, this is just an easy example, but we can't have a day where everybody's working remotely, you know what I mean? So we maintain some internal calendars just to see what does that look like, and, you know, just to try to have some structure around it. But again, it doesn't happen quite as often as people might think. But summer is naturally more flexible, and, you know, it's just kind of a nice option to have when it works. It doesn't always work, but.
In the employee handbook right now, in section 1.3.3, there's a statement under attendance for all employees that says the district expects employees to make every effort to be present for work. And I like the idea of flexibility and what you have written here. I'm wondering if perhaps we might want to put a sentence at the beginning that says something like, given we are a public school with community member expectations of regular school hours, the district expects employees to make every effort to be present for work, however, when mutually beneficial.
Sure. Can you email that to me?
Yes.
Thanks.
Well, you could almost read that different ways too. Like if I was working from home and I was present for work, I would read that as I'm present for work.
Present in the
You know what I- like-
district building, maybe change that,
Did you say physically?
physically present?
Maybe,
However you
yeah.
think.
email,
I like
yeah,
that
email
wording,
me
just the
what you just
change
said, and maybe Jody and I will mess with it a little bit and see.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the community and parents, you know, they have an expectation that when they come to a school building during regular school
Sure.
hours,
Yep.
that there
Yep.
are people there.
Okay.
All right. So you'll email me that. I can send an update to the board, and then we'll look to hopefully approve that at the next meeting. All right, so reading instructional goals and kindergarten assessment. So this is policy 2131.01. As part of an annual requirement, the reading specialist prepares a report evaluating the reading curriculum of the school district. Forward the report to me, who shall present the report to the board. So you have a copy, a hard copy in front of you of the report that our reading specialist created. Very similar process as last year. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, and this report is now attached to the agenda as well. But you can kind of see on the top part here, just doing a little bit of background and information about, you know, some of the terminology that you see commonly used, you know, throughout our reading program, and we're talking about district reading, looking at standards, curriculum, and resources, and what each of those things mean. And then she did a little bit of a breakdown of some things happening in each building. You've heard us talk a little bit about this year. Our K-5 grades had a new literacy program implemented this year, so that has taken a lot of time, effort, professional development on the behalf of our staff. Obviously Sarah and Pam as well as Trish and our reading specialist. So a lot of professional development happening there. You know, year one of any new resource is always challenging and exciting and frustrating all the same, but making some really good strides there. At the secondary level, so grades 6 through 12 just completed year 3 of StudySync, which was a new resource brought on a couple of years ago. Looking at continuing to find ways that teachers can continue to use that resource on a high level. A lot of good feedback from staff, highly engaging an online program, really starting to focus on pacing, looking at those essential standards, and again, now that you're in year 3, almost year 4, trying to measure the impact of that resource and looking at data and looking at assessments and how we feel that things are going and those kinds of things, but good feedback overall. Our high school team is working hard on using our EduClimber tool to further dive into data and some data literacy in terms of our reading and language arts, which is great. You can see here as part of Title I, the team has to create and share an annual Title I presentation. Obviously on your paper copy, you can't click that link, but if you click on the, and I think I emailed this to you as well. You can click on that link and look at the 22-23 review for Title I. Again, that's something that's required. At our next meeting, you will hear Trish talk a little bit more about Motion 57 and all of the legislation. I'm kind of laughing sarcastically a little bit that's maybe coming our way. That's going to require some pretty big professional development, likely some dollars to all the districts in Wisconsin as they are finalizing, looking at a bill, really specifically targeting grades K through 3 and ensuring that we have students that are high-level readers and having our staff focus on the science of reading and how to instruct students at that level. So lots of dialogue still happening at the state level about that, but we've asked Trish to talk a little bit more about that at the next meeting. And then kind of the last part here, looking at our 4-year-old kindergartners through 2nd grade and participating in a universal literacy assessment for reading readiness. So they use FastBridge, and we take that information and obviously try to drill down as much as we can to catch kids early on if we have some students that are struggling, to try to get that intervention to make sure they're proficient readers by the end of grade 3. And the last part, as you've heard me mention before, we now have our forward exam information, our ACT, our pre-ACT, so our buildings and our staff are starting to make their way through that data, trying to figure out what are the big areas of celebration, what are some areas of improvement. I know our principals have already been diving into that pretty heavily. Lots of good things coming out of that, and of course always things that we want to zero in on for the coming school year. So that's kind of the cliff notes of Mindy's presentation. I'm happy to answer questions that you have. Trish is here as well, who's probably even a better person to ask your questions to about this topic. But
When will we as a board see that testing data that comes forward?
So next meeting, you'll get probably a little bit of a glimpse. We still have to be a little bit careful about releasing our data. Have you heard me say before, the good thing is we're able to talk about some things publicly. I think our principals, and I don't want to speak for them, but are still kind of working through that at the point where we're probably not quite ready to be able to give a massive presentation on it yet, but I would anticipate early fall. Next meeting, you'll get a report on their building goals from the year. They'll touch on some of that data a little bit because they use that data as a basis for their building goals. But in terms of kind of the bigger picture of 22-23 assessment data, I would say probably count on more September-ish, roughly. All right, I'm gonna keep moving on with all my requirements I have tonight. So next one, looking at policy 8510 is our wellness policy. So not recommending any changes to the policy at this time. We do have a wellness committee, not policy committee, wellness committee that Jody Pahacek is leading up. We have a wide variety of staff that are really interested and engaged and excited, yay, to participate on this committee and create some activities around wellness for our staff. They met in April 2 times this year. They have another summer meeting planned for July 25th. To start talking about rolling out some activities in terms of wellness for our staff right away at the beginning of the year. Talking to health partners about some partnerships we can create together, which is awesome. That committee helped coordinate and support our Bike to School Day, which was fantastic. And also working closer with Deb Reveley and Taher about our menu choices and menu options and what does that look like, and trying to get some student feedback, some parent feedback. Now that we're kind of starting over with our Taher contract, we gave them a lot of feedback during that RFP process. Lacey's laughing. And so I know our wellness committee is finding kind of a newfound commitment to working a little bit closer with Taher on some of those policies and guidelines. So for a while, we didn't have anything happening with wellness. It was in kind of a lull with COVID, and it never really got going again. So I'm excited that we've got staff ready to engage and kind of get moving on this committee. And obviously, there's a big part in here of the policy about that too. So
do we have community members and students on the committee as per the report?
It says may include.
Yeah, so those are the next steps. So we started with getting staff, because that in the past at times has been hard. So Jody feels like she's got a good crew of staff members, and next part would be moving into, what are you looking at, the very bottom part? The required public
Page 2.
involvement?
Committee representatives, stakeholders may include.
Yeah, yep. So those will be some next steps to try and figure out what does that look like. Yep, she wasn't quite there yet, but
that'd be great.
Yeah, I can bring that back up to her too.
Board members.
There you go. All right. Thank you for that. Anything else with wellness? Otherwise, I'm going to keep moving and grooving here. All right, policy 8500. So this is another annual requirement, ensuring that essentially we are ensuring that our food management company is in alignment with food service standards and is compliant. and meeting with Deb and Taher. There are no issues, everything is good, we're in full compliance. One thing I'm required to do is ensure that Taher and Deb have a copy of this policy, which is the one I'm reading from, so I sent that to her a couple weeks ago, so we're good there. You know, no suggested changes at this time. These are things that Taher and Deb are highly familiar with at this point, so just an annual requirement that we talk about it and ensure that, that they have a copy of this policy every year. Piggybacking off that a little bit, so meal prices, we were hoping to have information about meal prices for this meeting so that you could have it as a first look and then approve at the next meeting. We didn't have that even as of today. So this is more of just an FYI that we fully anticipate we'll get meal prices in time for the June or July 24th meeting. And that is a meeting that I would be looking for action. You know, it's annual, a bit of a rubber stamp, but just something that has to be formally approved by the board every single year. We hoped we'd have it for today, and we didn't. Okay. All right. Almost done. So the last thing you have in front of you, or you have linked anyway, is a food memo for some trainings that we have coming up in August. These were similar to what we had last year as well. So August 1 and 2, we have our building leaders and our professional learning community leaders coming in for 2 days of training. So asking to be able to provide them lunch on those 2 days. And then August 8 and 9, we have our new staff orientation. So August 8th, that would mean having lunch brought in for that group. And August 9th is our Chamber of Commerce kind of partnership breakfast that we've had, that Jody has coordinated the last couple of years, which has been awesome. So asking for consideration and then hopefully approval at the next meeting regarding those 2 food requests.
So all of these trainings involve employees who are working outside their regular work hours?
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? Okay, I just have one celebration. I just want to shout out our 13 students that went to Costa Rica. If you remember way back initially when the 2 teachers came and kind of pitched that idea, Jen Roberts and Elizabeth Granick worked really hard for 2 years to put that trip together. We did post some pictures on Facebook. Hopefully you had a chance to see those. All went great, no issues. Kids had an absolute blast. A lot of really good feedback from parents, which was awesome. So just want to shout that out because trips like that take a ton of time, effort, coordination, high level of stress, taking 13 students to Costa Rica. But they did a fantastic job and kids had a great time. So thank you for allowing that to happen. And I know Elizabeth is looking forward to providing that opportunity again in 2 years. So
I saw those pictures. Were they in the Spartan School? I saw them and it wasn't on Facebook.
Oh,
I don't go there, but I saw some.
Maybe
Was there one on the district website?
I don't remember.
It wasn't the school.
Okay, maybe it was on the district website. It was a group photo. Anyway, it looked great.
Yeah, I think it was fantastic. Okay, sorry, that's all my stuff. A lot of nuts and bolts.
Okay. Then going forward for our topics of action, looking at the personnel update and the athletics personnel update. Any specific questions, concerns with that, or is there a motion to approve those as presented?
I make a motion to approve 12A and B as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to our once around the table. Sure, you want to start us out tonight?
Sure. I have nothing.
Okay. Marge.
I just want to say thank you to all the teachers and staff for all they've done, and to the committee that reviewed the books, and for all their hard work.
Lori?
Yeah. Leslie Thomas got another grant, and I I've been looking through my emails because I'm trying to count up how many there have been. And she talks about round 1 and round 2, and now we're in round 3. And I think this is the 20th grant she's gotten for the district. And part of those funds go directly to the district to help pay payroll. And then there's a little bit also for incentive pay for those employees. And she has just done a fabulous job. Thank you very much.
Yeah?
I'll just thank all the people that gave public comment tonight. Everybody seems to see reason, maybe.
Is there a day for board development? Because we talked about a full day with Lee and administrators. Is that on the calendar?
I have it on my calendar.
Yeah, it's August 15th, but you guys are 5:30 to 9:30. So, did I add it to everyone's calendar?
I don't have it.
Oh, yeah, you're all on
I
it.
just wrote it. I have it 5:30 to, I put 9:30. It's not gonna really be 9:30, is it?
Lori, it's gonna be so great. So you all are on it.
We got an
So
invite.
Bruce and Cherie have accepted. Yeah.
It's in red on my calendar, which
Oh.
means something that Alicia sent, if it's in red.
So 5:30 to 9:30?
Yep, on the 15th. So that is admin team and board together.
And then just piggybacking off of that, I did send a board self-evaluation to all of you, I believe, Wednesday. So it was originally gonna go on this agenda, but now we'll be putting it on the August work session. So if you, when you are finished with that, if you could make a copy and send it to me. And then to piggyback off of that, we will go and do closed session and do our superintendent evaluation at our next meeting. But since everybody wasn't here and we kind of had made a point the last time that everybody is present for that, putting it on next agenda.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any comment, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned at 8:11.